Welcome to the Echoes of Ihsan podcast, where we like to take these deep dives into some really fascinating Islamic teachings.
Yeah.
And today we are embarking on a journey through Sunan Abu Dawud,
Okay.
specifically Book 1, which focuses on purification.
Purification.
And I have to admit, just glancing through this book, I was struck by
Mm-hmm.
the level of detail and the way even seemingly mundane acts
Right.
are infused with this spiritual significance.
Yeah, what's captivating about this book is that it really gives us this window into fiqh
Oh, yeah.
Islamic jurisprudence and how it meticulously lays out these guidelines for ritual purity.
Mm-hmm.
And you see in Islam purification, it's not just about physical cleanliness.
Okay.
It's actually a cornerstone of worship and daily life.
So it's like a guidebook almost for how Muslims prepare for prayer
Yeah.
and how they approach their daily activities with a heightened sense of awareness and intention.
Think of it as a blueprint for approaching everyday life with a consciousness of God's presence.
Right.
Recognizing that even the most ordinary actions can be infused with this spiritual meaning.
Yeah, I can already tell that our listener who might be joining us with varying levels of familiarity with Islam
Right.
is going to find this incredibly insightful.
Yeah.
So what are some of the key themes or highlights they can expect to encounter in this deep dive?
Well, first and foremost, I think they'll discover this profound emphasis on privacy and respect, particularly when it comes to relieving oneself.
Yeah.
It's not just about finding a secluded spot, it's about cultivating a sense of modesty that extends to all aspects of life.
You know, as I was reading through the hadiths, I was really struck by the first two,
Yeah.
where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, went to great lengths to find privacy, even when he was out in the open desert.
That's a perfect example of the Islamic concept of haya,
Haya.
which encompasses modesty, shyness, and this deep sense of decorum in one's actions and interactions.
Okay.
It's about embodying the spiritual etiquette that guides even the most private moments.
So it goes beyond just like physical privacy.
Hmm.
It's about maintaining a certain awareness and conduct that aligns with Islamic values.
Precisely. And this brings up an interesting question for our listener
Oh, yeah.
to consider,
Oh, what's that?
how do modern notions of privacy compare to those in the Prophet's time? Especially in today's world where technology and social media often blur the lines between public and private.
Right.
How do we navigate those boundaries with a sense of haya?
It's definitely a fascinating comparison,
Yeah.
especially when you consider how much our lives are documented and shared online now.
Mm-hmm.
As we delve deeper into this book, another thing that stood out to me was the emphasis on intentionality.
Okay.
Even in seemingly mundane acts, like, for example, there are specific prayers to be recited upon entering and exiting the bathroom.
You're referring to Hadith 4, 5, and 6.
Okay.
Which beautifully illustrate how Islam brings the spiritual dimension to even the most routine aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
These prayers, which involve seeking refuge in God from evil spirits, highlight the belief that places like toilets,
Yeah.
which were traditionally believed to be frequented by jinn,
Jinn.
which are spiritual beings that can be either benevolent or malevolent,
Interesting.
require a heightened sense of spiritual awareness and protection.
It's almost like creating a sacred space, even in a place we usually don't associate with spirituality.
Exactly, by invoking God's name and seeking his protection.
Mm-hmm.
We transform this mundane act into an opportunity to connect with the divine
Right.
and infuse our daily lives with this spiritual significance.
I'm curious, listener, do you have any rituals or practices that bring a sense of peace or sacredness into your everyday routine?
Yeah.
Maybe it's lighting a candle before you start work
Yeah.
or taking a moment of silence before a meal.
Yeah, those are good examples.
I think we often underestimate the power of those little rituals to elevate our awareness and bring intentionality into our day.
Right.
You're getting into something that initially puzzled me.
Okay.
There's a set of hadiths that deal with facing the Qibla, which is the direction of prayer,
Right.
while relieving oneself.
Okay.
And there seem to be some conflicting rulings.
Mm-hmm.
Some hadiths forbid it, while others suggest it's permissible.
You've hit upon a very important point about understanding hadith.
Oh, yeah.
Context and chronology are absolutely crucial when interpreting these sacred texts.
Okay.
The earlier Hadith number 7 prohibits facing the Qibla.
Okay.
However, as Islamic understanding evolved,
Mm-hmm.
later Hadiths like numbers 12 and 13 seem to offer more flexibility.
Interesting.
This is a testament to the principle of progressive revelation in Islam,
Okay.
where God's guidance unfolded gradually, addressing new situations and questions as they arose.
So how should our listener approach these seemingly contradictory rulings?
By remembering that Islamic scholarship is dynamic, not static,
Right.
later revelations or clarifications often provide a more nuanced understanding.
Okay.
And it's essential to consider the full body of knowledge when interpreting any single hadith. This teaches us a valuable lesson about approaching information in general, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's a reminder to be critical thinkers,
Yeah.
to consider the context, the timing, and the evolution of understanding when we encounter seemingly conflicting information.
Right.
It's about looking for the bigger picture and not getting hung up on, like, isolated statements.
Speaking of cultural nuances, I was intrigued by the emphasis on the distinct roles of the left and right hands in Islamic tradition.
Oh, yeah.
Hadiths 29 and 32 through 34 explicitly state that the right hand is designated for eating and other clean actions,
Okay.
while the left hand is reserved for cleansing oneself.
It's almost like a physical manifestation of separating purity from impurity, isn't it?
Exactly.
And it goes beyond just hygiene. It's about maintaining a spiritual awareness and order in one's actions.
Precisely, this separation holds deep symbolic significance in Islam.
Okay.
The right hand associated with purity and honor is used for interacting with things considered sacred or pure. The left hand, while not inherently bad, is designated for actions related to cleansing and bodily functions, symbolizing a separation between the pure and the impure. I wonder, listener, do you have any cultural norms around left or right-handedness in your own experience?
Yeah.
Maybe certain tasks are deemed appropriate for one hand over the other?
Yeah, like in some cultures, it's considered rude to eat with your left hand,
Right.
which seems to echo this idea of hand symbolism.
It's fascinating how these concepts often transcend cultures and religions.
Speaking of cleansing, the hadiths also provide very specific instructions on the preferred method of purification after using the toilet. And it's not what most of us are used to.
Yeah, combining Hadith 7 and 40 through 44,
Yeah.
we see a clear picture of the method recommended by the Prophet.
Okay.
Cleansing with stones, followed ideally by water.
With stones.
This might seem unusual today,
Yeah.
but in the historical context of 7th century, Arabia's stones were readily available
Right.
and provided an effective means of cleansing. It's a fascinating example of how practices evolve with changing resources and technologies, while the underlying principles remain constant.
Yeah, it's like a little window into the everyday realities of life in the Prophet's time.
Exactly.
And just to add a layer of detail that I found particularly intriguing, Hadith 40 specifically prescribes using 3 stones.
3 stones.
It's very specific.
That level of detail might surprise some,
Yeah.
but it underscores the importance of following the prescribed method diligently.
Okay.
It's not just about cleansing haphazardly.
Right.
It's about approaching even these acts with intention and precision.
Speaking of which, this next point really challenged my own assumptions about purity.
Okay, what's that?
Hadiths 66 and 67 emphasize the Islamic belief that water is inherently pure and cannot be defiled.
This concept is truly fascinating
It is.
and might seem counterintuitive to our modern sensibilities around contamination.
Yeah.
We tend to view water as susceptible to impurities and requiring purification.
Especially with all the, pollution and things like that nowadays.
Especially in today's world where pollution is a major concern.
Right.
But in Islamic thought, water is seen as a purifying agent.
Interesting.
And its essential nature remains pure, even if things that might seem impure are added to it.
It makes you think about different cultural and religious perspectives on purity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Listener, does this Islamic view of water resonate with you, or do you see it differently?
Yeah.
It's a great example of how exploring these teachings can challenge our own assumptions and broaden our understanding of the world.
And it speaks to the power of perspective, how different cultures and belief systems shape our understanding of even the most fundamental elements like water.
Right.
Now, moving on to a topic that often generates a lot of discussion.
Okay.
These hadiths also address the Islamic perspective on dogs.
Yes. This is where we see a clear distinction between Islamic teachings and the way dogs are often viewed in modern Western society.
Yeah.
Hadith 71 through 73 provide specific instructions for purifying a utensil that has been licked by a dog.
The prescribed method involves washing the utensil 7 times, with sand included on the 7th wash.
7 times, wow.
And this is rooted in the Islamic understanding of dogs as ritually impure,
Okay.
which of course differs significantly from many cultures where dogs are beloved companions
Right.
and even considered part of the family.
And what I found particularly interesting is the contrast with Hadith 76,
Okay.
which states that cats are not considered ritually impure in Islam.
Right.
Okay, so I have to ask why the different treatment for dogs and cats, it almost feels like a contradiction.
It's less of a contradiction and more of a reflection of cultural context and how different societies have historically viewed and interacted with animals. Remember the Prophet Muhammad lived in a specific time and place, and his teachings addressed the prevailing cultural norms and understandings of 7th century Arabia. In that context, dogs were often seen as working animals used for guarding or herding.
Okay.
And they might not have been integrated into homes the way they are in many cultures today.
So it's not about judging one animal as better than another.
Right.
It's about understanding the historical and cultural backdrop of these practices.
Exactly. And it's a reminder for our listener to approach these topics with sensitivity and an open mind.
Right.
There's often more to the story than meets the eye.
Yeah.
And digging deeper into the cultural and historical context can lead to a richer understanding.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's explore the concept of tayammum, which demonstrates the practicality and adaptability of Islamic law.
Tayammum, as we mentioned earlier, is the practice of using clean earth for purification when water is unavailable or inaccessible.
Okay, this one really fascinated me.
Hadiths 317 through 320 provide a fascinating glimpse into this unique practice, highlighting the ingenuity and flexibility of Islamic teachings.
I was amazed by the level of detail in these hadiths.
Right.
It's not just a matter of rubbing some dirt on your hands.
Right.
There's a very specific method involved.
Absolutely. Hadiths 319 and 320 describe striking the earth with one's hands, wiping the face and hands, and even extending the wiping to the forearms.
Wow.
It's a precise ritual demonstrating that even in the absence of water, purification requires intentionality and adherence to a prescribed form. It's not simply a backup option, but a fully valid form of purification with its own spiritual significance.
And what I find particularly beautiful is the story behind the revelation of tayammum. Aisha, the Prophet's wife, lost her necklace during a journey, and the search for it delayed them.
Right.
By the time prayer was due, they had no water available.
Exactly.
It's remarkable how real-life events often led to these practical and compassionate rulings.
It speaks volumes about the dynamic nature of Islamic jurisprudence and its responsiveness to the needs of the community.
Right.
It's about maintaining a connection with God even in the most challenging situations, demonstrating that faith is not meant to be rigid or burdensome, but rather a source of support and guidance in every aspect of life.
Listener, have you ever encountered situations where religious traditions or practices have had to adapt to unexpected circumstances?
Yeah.
It's a testament to the resilience and adaptability of faith in the face of life's challenges.
Indeed, it reminds us that faith is a living, breathing thing, constantly evolving and adapting to meet the needs of individuals and communities throughout history.
And now, shifting our focus to the concluding portion of this section of our source material, we encounter hadiths addressing the topic of Friday purification.
Friday purification.
Yeah, Hadith 341 through 354 delve into the highly recommended, though not obligatory practice of taking a full bath before attending Friday prayer.
Right.
A practice that highlights the special significance of Friday in Islam.
Friday, as we discussed earlier, holds a unique position in the Islamic week. It's a day of communal gathering and prayer, a time to come together as a community and reaffirm one's connection with God and with fellow Muslims.
And it's fascinating how this communal aspect is reflected in the emphasis on cleanliness and presenting oneself in the best possible manner.
Absolutely. Hadiths 342 and 343 highlight this beautiful connection, encouraging not only bathing, but also wearing one's finest clothes and using perfume.
Wow.
It's about approaching this communal act of worship with a sense of reverence both for God and for the community.
It's about elevating the entire experience, recognizing that our outward appearance can reflect our inner state of purity and intention.
Right.
And I love this story in Hadith 353 that provides some historical context for the Friday bath.
Okay.
It mentions how the Prophet encouraged this practice, partly because the early mosque was small and crowded and people would get sweaty and smelly.
It's a wonderfully humanizing detail, isn't it?
It is.
It shows us that even Prophet, peace be upon him, dealt with practical everyday issues and sought solutions that benefited the well-being and comfort of his community.
It also highlights the evolutionary nature of religious practices, how they adapt to changing circumstances while preserving the underlying principles.
Right.
And it's a reminder that spirituality is not divorced from the practical realities of life.
Right.
It's about finding a balance, integrating spiritual practices into our daily lives in a way that is meaningful and beneficial. Now, listener, as we move into the next section of our deep dive, think about this. Do you have any rituals or routines specific to certain days or events?
Right.
Maybe it's a special outfit you wear for a big presentation or a particular breakfast you enjoy on Sundays.
Yeah.
How do these small acts shape your mindset and prepare you for what lies ahead?
It's a fascinating question to contemplate. As we continue our exploration, our next section delves into some specific rulings regarding impurities and how to cleanse oneself properly, offering even deeper insights into the practical application of these principles.
Yes, this is where we really get into the nitty-gritty of maintaining ritual purity in everyday life.
Yeah, it's remarkable how these seemingly small acts can hold such profound meaning and impact our mindset, shifting gears a bit. Let's delve into another intriguing aspect of purification practices, dealing with specific substances, especially when it comes to maintaining ritual purity.
Yeah, I was particularly curious about the hadiths concerning utensils and animals, specifically dogs. We touched on this briefly before, but I think it deserves a closer look, especially given how much our views on animals have evolved over time.
Absolutely. As we discussed earlier, the Islamic perspective on dogs differs from how they are viewed in many cultures today.
Right.
Hadiths 71, 72, and 73 meticulously detail the process of purifying a utensil that has been licked by a dog.
7 washes with sand included in the final one.
Right.
It's such a specific and detailed method. I have to admit, it made me wonder why such an elaborate ritual for something as simple as a dog licking a dish.
That's a great question, and it highlights the emphasis in Islam on following prescribed rituals diligently. It's not merely about hygiene in the conventional sense, but about adhering to a divinely ordained practice. This meticulousness reflects a deep respect for the sanctity of ritual purity and the importance of aligning our actions with God's guidance.
So it's about more than just removing physical traces. It's about a deeper spiritual cleansing as well.
Precisely, it's about recognizing that even our interactions with animals have spiritual implications and require a conscious effort to maintain ritual purity. And this brings us to a point that might raise some eyebrows for our listeners, the contrasting view of cats in Islamic tradition.
Yes, Hadith 76 explicitly states that cats are not considered ritually impure in Islam. Okay. I have to confess, this one really threw me for a loop. Why the distinction? It seems like a bit of a head-scratcher, especially for those of us who adore our feline companions.
That's a very natural question, and it beautifully highlights the importance of cultural context. Remember, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, lived in a specific time and place, and his teachings often address the prevailing cultural norms and understandings of 7th century Arabia. In that context, cats were often prized for their cleanliness and their role in controlling pests, and they were welcomed into homes. This positive view of cats is reflected in numerous hadiths and stories about the Prophet's own fondness for them.
So it's not about cats being inherently better than dogs. It's about understanding how different animals were perceived and integrated into society at that time.
Exactly. And it's a valuable reminder for us today to approach these topics with a nuanced understanding, recognizing that cultural perspectives on animals can vary widely. Listener, take a moment to reflect on your own cultural background. Are there certain animals that hold specific symbolic meanings or are treated differently based on tradition or belief? It's fascinating how these perceptions shape our interactions with the animal world.
It's a great reminder that our own cultural lenses influence how we view the world, and exploring these differences can broaden our understanding and appreciation of diverse perspectives. Now, speaking of diverse perspectives, let's dive into the concept of tayammum, which beautifully illustrates the practicality and adaptability of Islamic law.
Tayammum, as we mentioned earlier, is the practice of using clean earth for purification when water is scarce or inaccessible. Hadiths 317 through 320 provide a fascinating glimpse into this unique practice, highlighting the ingenuity and flexibility of Islamic teachings.
I was amazed by the level of detail in these hadiths. It's not just a matter of rubbing some dirt on your hands. There's a very specific method involved.
Absolutely. Hadiths 319 and 320 describe striking the earth with one's hands, wiping the face and hands, and even extending the wiping to the forearms. It's a precise ritual demonstrating that even in the absence of water purification requires intentionality and adherence to a prescribed form. It's not simply a backup option, but a fully valid form of purification with its own spiritual significance.
And what I find particularly beautiful is the story behind the revelation of Tayammum Maisha, the prophet's wife, lost her necklace during a journey, and the search for it delayed them. By the time prayer was due, they had no water available. It's remarkable how real-life events often led to these practical and compassionate rulings.
It speaks volumes about the dynamic nature of Islamic jurisprudence and its responsiveness to the needs of the community. It's about maintaining a connection with God, even in the most challenging situations, demonstrating that faith is not meant to be rigid or burdensome, but rather a source of support and guidance in every aspect of life.
Listener, have you ever encountered situations where religious traditions or practices have had to adapt to unexpected circumstances? It's a testament to the resilience and adaptability of faith in the face of life's challenges.
Indeed, it reminds us that faith is a living, breathing thing, constantly evolving and adapting to meet the needs of individuals and communities throughout history. And now, shifting our focus to the concluding portion of this section of our source material, we encounter hadiths addressing the topic of Friday purification.
Yes, hadiths 341 through 354 delve into the highly recommended, though not obligatory, practice of taking a full bath before attending Friday prayer, a practice that highlights the special significance of Friday in Islam.
Friday, as we discussed earlier, holds a unique position in the Islamic week. It's a day of communal gathering and prayer, a time to come together as a community and reaffirm one's connection with God and with fellow Muslims.
And it's fascinating how this communal aspect is reflected in the emphasis on cleanliness and presenting oneself in the best possible manner.
Absolutely. Hadiths 342 and 343 highlight this beautiful connection, encouraging not only bathing, but also wearing one's finest clothes and using perfume.
Yeah.
It's about approaching this communal act of worship with a sense of reverence, both for God and for the community.
It's about elevating the entire experience, recognizing that our outward appearance can reflect our inner state of purity and intention. And I love the story in Hadith 353 that provides some historical context for the Friday bath. It mentions how the Prophet encouraged this practice, partly because the early mosque was small and crowded and people would get sweaty and smelly.
It's a wonderfully humanizing detail, isn't it? It shows us that even the Prophet, peace be upon him, dealt with practical everyday issues and sought solutions that benefited the well-being and comfort of his community. It also highlights the evolutionary nature of religious practices, how they adapt to changing circumstances while preserving the underlying principles.
And it's a reminder that spirituality is not divorced from the practical realities of life. It's about finding a balance, integrating spiritual practices into our daily lives in a way that is meaningful and beneficial. Now, listeners, we move into the next section of our deep dive. Think about this. Do you have any rituals or routines specific to certain days or events? Maybe it's a special outfit you wear for a big presentation or a particular breakfast you enjoy on Sundays. How do these small acts shape your mindset and prepare you for what lies ahead?
It's a fascinating question to contemplate. As we continue our exploration, our next section delves into some specific rulings regarding impurities and how to cleanse oneself properly, offering even deeper insights into the practical application of these principles.
Yes. This is where we really get into the nitty-gritty of maintaining ritual purity in everyday life.
Hadiths 355 and 356, for example, discuss the importance of cleansing oneself thoroughly after embracing Islam, symbolizing a fresh start and a commitment to spiritual purity. The specific mention of removing hair that grew during the period of disbelief is particularly noteworthy, highlighting the idea of a complete physical and spiritual transformation.
It's like shedding the past and embracing a new way of life, both internally and externally.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that conversion is not just a change of belief. It's a holistic transformation that encompasses every aspect of one's being. Now, Hadiths 358 and 359 address a very specific and practical question: how to handle menstrual blood on clothing. It's an example of how these teachings provide guidance for even the most intimate aspects of women's lives.
And the methods described are quite detailed, involving scraping, washing, and even using saliva. In certain cases, it might seem surprising to modern sensibilities, but it's important to remember that these practices were born out of necessity and resourcefulness, offering practical solutions within the context of the time.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to approach these topics with sensitivity and understanding, recognizing that what might seem strange or outdated to us today was once considered perfectly normal and even essential. It's about respecting the historical context and appreciating the wisdom and practicality of these teachings.
Listeners, have you ever encountered cultural practices or beliefs that seemed unusual at first but made sense once you understood the historical or social context? I think this concept of cultural relativity is vital for respectful dialogue and understanding across cultures and time periods. It's about approaching these differences with curiosity rather than judgment.
That's a wonderfully important point. It encourages us to be open-minded and to recognize that our own perspectives are shaped by our own cultural and historical experiences.
Okay, so moving on to a topic that often sparks curiosity and debate the permissibility of certain actions while in a state of ritual impurity. This is where we see some rulings that might challenge our preconceived notions about what is and isn't allowed.
Exactly. Hadith 366 and 367, for example, address the question of whether the prophet would pray in garments that had come into contact with menstrual blood. And the answer seems to be that he did, as long as there was no visible impurity present.
Seems like a very practical approach, recognizing that life doesn't always fit neatly into categories of pure and impure.
Precisely. And this highlights the principle that Islam seeks to make things easy and accessible for its followers, recognizing the realities of human experience. It's about avoiding unnecessary hardship and finding a balance between upholding principles and accommodating the complexities of life.
However, Hadith 368 and 369 present a slightly different perspective, suggesting that the prophet would not pray in quilts or wrappers that had been used by menstruating women. Okay, so there seems to be some nuance here. How do we reconcile these seemingly different rulings?
Again, it's important to emphasize that context is key when interpreting these hadiths. The exact circumstances surrounding each hadith might differ, and there might be specific reasons why the prophet acted in a certain way. Perhaps the type of contact, the degree of potential impurity, or other factors influence the decision.
So it's not always about finding a black and white rule, but about understanding the principles behind the rulings and how they were applied in different situations. Listener, this might be a good time to reflect on how you approach seemingly conflicting information or perspectives. Do you always seek to find a definitive answer, or do you embrace the possibility of multiple interpretations depending on the context? It's a valuable skill to cultivate in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information from various sources.
It encourages us to think critically, to consider different perspectives, and to be open to the possibility that there might not always be a single absolute truth.
Now let's turn our attention to a hadith that addresses a very specific scenario: cleansing garments soiled by a baby's urine. This one really caught my eye because of the level of detail and the way it highlights the nuanced nature of these rulings.
Yes, Hadiths 375 and 376 provide specific instructions on how to clean garments soiled by the urine of a child, and here's where it gets particularly interesting. The method differs depending on whether the baby is a boy or a girl.
This is the part that really surprised me. Why the distinction?
The Hadith states that the urine of a female child is to be washed thoroughly, while the urine of a male child only needs to be sprinkled with water. This might seem puzzling at first, but it reflects a deeper understanding of anatomy and physiology. The female urethra is shorter and closer to the anus, potentially leading to a higher likelihood of contamination.
So it's not about arbitrarily assigning different levels of purity. It's about recognizing anatomical differences and adjusting the cleansing methods accordingly.
Exactly, and it highlights the scientific awareness and practicality embedded within these seemingly ancient traditions. It's a reminder that these teachings were not merely based on blind faith, but often incorporated observations and understandings of the natural world.
It's fascinating how these seemingly minor details can reveal such profound insights into the way Islamic teachings integrated faith, science, and everyday practicality, listeners. What are your thoughts on this? Did you find this level of detail comforting, restrictive, or perhaps something else altogether?
It's a great question to ponder as we continue our exploration. Each of these hadiths offers a unique window into the world of Islamic jurisprudence, challenging us to think critically, to broaden our perspectives, and to appreciate the richness and complexity of these ancient traditions.
Yeah, it really is fascinating how those seemingly minor details can provide these profound insights into the way Islamic teachings integrated faith, science, and everyday practicality.
Yeah, it makes you really appreciate the depth and the comprehensiveness of this tradition. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Sunan Abu Dawud, Book 1,
what are the key takeaways for our listener?
well, I think the central message is that purity in Islam, it's much more than just physical cleanliness.
Right.
It's about cultivating the state of spiritual awareness, intentionality, and reverence that permeates every aspect of our lives.
It's about recognizing that even the most mundane actions
Yeah.
From how we relieve ourselves to how we interact with animals, can become acts of worship when approached with the right mindset.
Exactly. And we've seen how these principles are like woven into the very fabric of Islamic teachings, from the specific prayers to be recited upon entering and exiting the bathroom
Right.
to the detailed methods for cleansing oneself after using the toilet.
It's not just about adhering to rules for the sake of following rules.
Right.
These practices are designed to cultivate a heightened sense of awareness, to remind us of God's presence in every moment, and to elevate even the most ordinary actions to a level of spiritual significance.
And one of the things that struck me as we delved into these hadiths
Yeah.
was the practicality and adaptability of Islamic law. We saw how Islam offers these alternative means of purification, like tayammum, when water is unavailable,
Right.
ensuring that worship can continue even in the most challenging circumstances.
It's a beautiful example of how faith can be both steadfast in its principles and flexible in its application, meeting people where they are and providing practical solutions for the realities of human experience.
And speaking of practicality,
Yes.
the hadiths we've explored don't shy away from addressing even the most intimate and sometimes seemingly embarrassing aspects of life.
Right.
From menstrual blood on clothing to a Bedouin urinating in the mosque.
Yeah, we saw it all.
We see that no topic is taboo when it comes to maintaining ritual purity.
And I think that's really important because it shows that these teachings are meant for real people living real lives with all the messy and unexpected moments that life throws our way. It's not about striving for an unattainable level of perfection, but about approaching every situation with awareness and seeking guidance on how to maintain a state of purity, both physically and spiritually.
Absolutely. And as we journeyed through these hadiths, we also encountered some seemingly contradictory rulings, reminding us of the importance of context and chronology. When interpreting these sacred texts, we saw how Islamic understanding evolved over time, with later revelations or clarifications, often providing a more nuanced perspective.
It's a valuable lesson for us all, isn't it? To approach information with a critical eye, to consider the historical and cultural context, and to recognize that understanding can deepen and evolve over time.
And to remember that knowledge is a journey, not a destination. There's always more to learn, more to uncover, and more to ponder as we delve deeper into these teachings.
And speaking of uncovering more, we've only scratched the surface of what's covered in Book 1 of Sunan Abu Dawud. There are entire sections on ablution, menstruation, ritual baths, and so much more that we didn't even have time to touch on today.
Yeah, it's a treasure trove of insights waiting to be explored,
It is.
offering a glimpse into the richness and depth of Islamic tradition.
So listener, as we conclude this deep dive, we leave you with this final thought-provoking question. How can these ancient practices rooted in the context of 7th century Arabia inform our understanding of spirituality and hygiene in the modern world? Do they offer valuable lessons that transcend time and culture, or are they simply relics of the past? We encourage you to continue exploring these questions, to engage in thoughtful dialogue, and to see how these teachings might resonate with your own life and experiences.
Remember, the journey of seeking knowledge is an ongoing one. May this deep dive inspire you to continue exploring, questioning, and deepening your understanding of Islam and its profound teachings.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into Sunan Abu Dawud, Book 1 on Purification. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration of Islamic teachings. Join us next time as we delve into another fascinating topic, uncovering the gems of wisdom and guidance that lie within these ancient traditions. Until then, may peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you.